JMC 102. Today we have a very special episode of Driven to Madness. It is an interview with Kathleen Miller, who is the owner of Comic Shop on 4th Avenue in Huntington, West Virginia. Here's a little thing that we talked about. We talked about how she founded Comic World and when she first came into Huntington and stuff like that. So please enjoy the interview. But before we get to the interview, here is the weather.
I don't go outside.
No, you don't, Matthew. Anyways, here y'all go.
How long have you lived in Huntington?
My whole life.
What was it like when you, to start out with, like when you were little?
I think when I was little, Huntington was a lot more independent. And I say that it was less corporate. There were obviously corporations, you had gas stations, filling stations, grocery stores, that kind of thing, but you had a lot more community stuff. I grew up in a community where you had little grocery stores on the corner. You know, I could walk to Sears department store. Schools were more local. Now things are, you're bussed out, and I think it was more family owned.
So it wasn't just like big business and stuff like that?
Yeah, you got to know the guy that owned the hardware store. You knew the guy that owned, the bookstore, the newsstand, that kind of thing.
So besides the corporate thing and all that, how do you think it's changed over the years?
Well, a lot of the younger people have left. You have a lot less industry here. There's a lot less jobs, a lot less opportunity for people, and so they've moved away. So that's one thing. Huntington has deteriorated a lot, which is sad. You have people, because people have left, I guess they don't have the money to keep up the houses and that kind of thing, the people that are still living here, so it's deteriorated a lot. But I think you see that in a lot of cities across the country, not just Huntington.
What do you miss most about the way it used to be?
Getting to know people, being more personable, close, like I said, knowing who ran the store down the street and talking to them, knowing your neighbors a little bit more. Communities I think were a little more closer than they are now. Nowadays you live in areas and you may not even know anybody on your block or in your neighborhood, so I think that's changed.
So what did you think you would be when you grew up?
I did not know.
You didn't know?
No, I had no clue.
How'd you get into the comic shop?
The comic book business, I got into, some would say it was, I laughingly call it the fickle finger of fate, synchronicity, just a fluke. If you would have told me I was going to grow up and be in the comic book business, I would have laughed because I never had a comic book as a kid. I was not allowed to read the Sunday funnies, let alone go get a comic book. So it was totally something I would never have thought of. I got my first comic at the age of 16 in Houston, Texas. I was there on a little trip and was at a flea market, and there was a guy there selling a bunch of comics for $0.25, and I found the classic Alice in Wonderland. And I read tons of books as a kid, lots of books. So it fascinated me that here was a comic book, a funny book is what I called it, a funny book of Alice in Wonderland. And on the back it gives all the other classics that were printed at the time, and I wanted to come home and collect them all. And there were no comic shops to buy them here. So I ran an ad in the paper that I was buying classic comics. And before long I had a whole house full of comic books. So I thought, maybe somebody else out there is looking for some of these. So that's when I started.
It was one of those things that you never expected to happen.
Yeah, I've been very lucky, very blessed.
That's really cool. What lessons has your work taught you?
I think one of the most important things my work and life has taught me is to honor what works for me. I'm obviously a woman, and the comic book business, when I started, I don't know that there was any other shop in the country ran by a woman, and a lot of guys took offense at that. It was sort of, a thing for guys. You have comic shops, and so I was kind of not so things that worked for guys running comic shops didn't really work for me.
Yeah.
So I had to honor if it felt good for me to do it or not, and I tried to go with that.
So it was kind of a shock to the males in
It
comics.
was always a surprise.
Yeah.
Even today, when I still go to comic shops in other cities and stuff, if I'm looking for comics, I'll mention, yeah, I own a comic shop. It's always a little bit like, but there are more women today that own comic shops. When I started, there weren't.
That's pretty awesome. What are you proudest of in your life?
Probably just being persistent, staying the course, not giving up the least little thing that comes along, or refusing to let other people's naysayers say you can't do something, and being able to say, maybe it's possible. So that.
Who is your biggest influence?
I would say that would be my father.
Why would you say that your father was your biggest influence?
Well, obviously we get a lot of our core beliefs from our parents, and I think my father probably had the biggest influence simply because I felt so loved by him as a child. But he also had lots of, he was encouraging. He ran his own business, and it was a small business, but he would, tell how you could do this was possible. And so I think he was probably the biggest influence for me.
How's your life been different than what you'd imagined?
I think probably just the fact that I never envisioned owning my own business for my whole life. Like I say, I've been very lucky that I've been able to do something so enjoyable and, be my own boss. That's been really something I think has been very blessed having. So.
What does your future hold?
All kinds of possibilities.
Kinds of possibilities? Do you plan on keeping the comic shop for as long as you can? Stuff like that?
You never know with things. You never know. And that's something I've always never really done. Oh, I'm going to be here in 10 years. I'm going to be here in 20 years. Last week, I've been here 33 years.
Really?
So April 5th, 1980. I've been
That's...
here 33 years. And who knows? I try not to put it in concrete, leave it open. Who knows what can happen? So.
What was it like when you first opened your own business? Like, was it an awesome experience, or?
It was scary.
Scary?
Because I didn't know anything really about running a business. My father ran a grocery store.
It's awesome.
So, but I was a kid, then.
Yeah.
So I didn't really know so much about running a business. I didn't know as much about comics as other people in the industry knew about comics, but I was willing to learn. I think it was best that I didn't know, because that way I could learn and to sort of find my way, and I learned how to, promote things on my own. I found ways to, get the word out, publicity, just, And like I said, it was kind of a guy thing, so it was different. I did get a lot of press when I started because I was the first comic shop, in the state at the time, and the first one probably until you got to Lexington or Louisville at that time. So it was fun, but it was kind of scary. And it was tough times, too. 1980 was kind of rough.
Why was 1980 kind of rough?
Well, you had really high interest rates. It was the election between Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan. You had the hostages thing going on in Iran. It was kind of tough economic times at the time. So.
How would you like to be remembered?
Well, everybody says I'll be remembered as the comic book lady. But I think as somebody who was honest, positive, supportive, and persistent.
That word keeps cropping up right there.
Yeah.
What was the most expensive comic you ever sold?
Superman #1.